Thomas Edison. When you hear that name, what's the first thing that pops into your head? Probably the light bulb, right? But the story of the man who lit up our world is so much more complex, and honestly, way more exciting than just one invention. In this explainer, we're going to peel back the layers of the myth to find the real Edison, the relentless, complicated genius who didn't just invent products, he invented the very process of modern invention itself. All right, let's just dive right in by shattering the idea that Edison was some kind of perfect visionary. I mean, get this. He absolutely dismissed the radio, one of the most transformative technologies of the 20th century, calling it a lemon. This was not a man who blindly embraced the future. He was stubborn, he was opinionated, and sometimes, he was just plain wrong. So how did we end up with this almost mythical image of him? It all comes down to this character he created, the Wizard of Menlo Park. He was basically an American folk hero who seemed to conjure the future out of thin air, all by himself. But see that powerful image? That was no accident. Edison was a master showman, a genius of publicity with an almost supernatural gift for drama. He carefully crafted this persona. As one historian put it, P.T. Barnum could have learned something from Edison. He wasn't just selling technology, he was selling the incredible story of a lone genius. So if he wasn't a lone wizard, what was he? To find the real Edison, we have to look past the light bulb to what was arguably his greatest creation of all, the invention factory. He figured out how to turn that spark of genius into an industrial process. And this was it. This was no dusty workshop. This was Menlo Park, the world's first industrial research laboratory, a true crucible for creativity. Edison affectionately called his team his Muckers, and together they pioneered a totally radical new idea that invention wasn't a solitary eureka moment, but a systematic, collaborative, and scalable process.
And the process for the light bulb, it perfectly illustrates this whole point. It wasn't one idea. It was like an assembly line of innovation. I mean, look at this. Edison might have chosen the material, sure, but it was his team of specialists, people like Charles Batchelor, John Crucy, and Francis Upton, who perfected every single critical step. It was a symphony of specialists, not a solo performance.
And man, what a team it was. Edison had an incredible eye for talent. He knew his own weaknesses, like higher math, so what did he do? He hired Francis Upton, a brilliant mathematician. He needed someone who could build anything he could dream up, and he found him in John Crucy. He surrounded himself with masters of their craft who could turn his constant flood of ideas into a reality. This groundbreaking teamwork, though, was fueled by an absolutely relentless, almost inhuman work ethic. And Edison wasn't just the boss. He was the engine room of the entire operation. You've probably heard this quote. This was his defining philosophy, and he lived it every single day. For Edison, breakthroughs weren't some gift from the heavens. Nope. They were the result of brute force experimentation, of trying everything, of simply outworking the problem until it gave up. He believed you could literally grind your way to genius. You want to see that grind in action? Okay, so late in his life, his friends Harry Ford and Harvey Firestone asked him to find a domestic source of rubber. So Edison's team went on to test over 14,000 different plants. 14,000. And here's the kicker. After all that monumental effort, the project was a total failure. The rubber they managed to get was way too expensive and just couldn't compete with synthetics. It's a perfect lesson that even 99% perspiration doesn't always guarantee a win. But his drive was just legendary. In his early days, a new stock ticker design was failing with a huge order on the line. He gathered his top men, and as the story goes, he announced, "I've locked the door and you'll have to stay here until this job is completed." 60 straight hours they worked on pretty much nothing but coffee and sandwiches. And when they finally solved it, not a single man quit. That's the kind of loyalty his intensity inspired. All that hard work, however, had to be aimed at the right target. And boy, did he learn this lesson the hard way. One of his very first inventions was this brilliant electric vote tabulator, but politicians rejected it. Why? Because it worked too well. It got rid of the time they used for backroom deals while votes were being counted. It was right then that Edison made a vow. He would never again waste his time on invention for its own sake. From that moment on, if he couldn't sell it, he wouldn't invent it. And that fierce, market-driven mindset, well, it would lead him directly into the most public and vicious technology battle of the 19th century. This wasn't just about an invention anymore. This was war. war for the future of an entire industry that he was building from the ground up. And to understand just how personal this fight became, we don't even have to guess. We can look inside the pages of his own private diary. This is Edison, completely unfiltered, right in the middle of the whole conflict. So the battle was basically for the soul of the electrical grid. On one side, you had Edison's direct current, or DC, low voltage and, in his view, safe. On the other side was alternating current, or AC, championed by George Westinghouse and Nikola Tesla. AC could travel hundreds of miles, but it used high voltages that Edison saw as a deadly threat to the public. He didn't just see AC as competition, he saw it as a moral threat. Writing in his diary, he called his rival Westinghouse a menace and danger to every citizen. This wasn't marketing spin, you guys. This was his deeply held, furious conviction. You can just feel his frustration on the page. He accused his rivals of recklessly handling lightning force power as if it were no more threatening than a bee in a bottle. For Edison, this was a crusade to protect the public from what he saw as pure, dangerous irresponsibility. But in the end, it was a war he lost. AC's technical advantages just won out, and it secured huge contracts like the Chicago World's Fair. Years later, we see this entry in his diary. It's this quiet, grudging admission of defeat. He finally concedes that AC is here to stay. For a man like Edison, that must have been an incredibly bitter pill to swallow. So when we clear away all the myths, the failures, and the brutal corporate fights, what are we left with? What is Edison's true, lasting legacy? Well, ultimately, Edison's greatest invention was the process of invention itself. That Menlo Park invention factory became the blueprint for every modern R&D lab, from Bell Labs all the way to Google X. He proved that innovation could be managed and scaled. And he didn't just invent a light bulb. He built the entire system to support it, the power plants, the wiring, the meters. He literally built the modern world. Which brings us right back to our original question. The lone wizard? The ruthless CEO? The master publicist? The incredible truth about Thomas Edison is that he was all of them at once. A messy, brilliant, contradictory visionary whose real legacy isn't an object you can hold, but the very system that continues to invent our future.